Welcome to the White Wisteria Academy series, Interview with an Expert. Today, I will be talking to Yulia Eskin about how to become more visible in meetings. Visibility is an important tool in navigating your career. I have invited Yulia Eskin to get some valuable insight into why visibility is so important and how we can become more visible at meetings. Yulia Eskin is a software engineer and technical lead who built her career in Silicon Valley's startups. She is passionate about people, product, and technology. In 2020, she shifted gears to career coaching. She helps engineers develop more visibility and leadership skills so they can powerfully and authentically grow in their career. Yulia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yulia, so tell us what it means to be visible and why it is so important to be visible at meetings.
So I will first start with why it's important because that really creates a foundation of going outside of your comfort zone and starting to become more visible. So the importance here is that visibility is literally the foundation for any kind of growth that you can expect in your career. It's people on your team and outside your team perceiving you as an expert. It's people
Mhm.
seeing that you are engaged in your role, that you care about your job and your career. And of course, it also leads to promotions, it leads to bonuses, it leads to
Mhm.
salary increases, and it leads to people wanting to give you more responsibility in your role, which is how you end up growing and moving into leadership if you're interested in that as well.
Mhm.
And in terms of what does visibility actually mean in a meeting setting, I think it really starts from active listening and paying attention. A lot
Right.
of times I'm seeing that there's a large meeting, and it's easy when it's a large meeting to sort of disconnect, either check your
Mhm.
phone or continue working through the meeting and trying to
Yeah.
multitask. And although I understand that urge to get more work done, it makes you
Mhm.
look not as interested in the topic. And so people sort of pass over you if they think, I want to discuss this topic with Yulia. So the active listening is really important, paying attention, making eye contact with the person who speaks, keeping your head raised and like looking around the room.
Mhm.
The great thing about it is that even if you're not contributing in that meeting, just doing that helps you build knowledge towards a topic so that later on you can contribute in the next meeting or so forth.
Right.
The other thing about visibility in the meeting is actually asking questions. One of the really key and basic tools you have is your curiosity. And
Mhm.
so, especially when it's a large meeting and you already have the benefit of the context that maybe there's people there that are presenting work that you're not as familiar with on your team or outside your team, or there's somebody that is, let's say in a tech scenario, somebody from product who's presenting kind of the higher level reason or mission for the work
Mhm.
that we're doing as a team. That's your chance to really interject, to ask, I want to know a little bit more about the user. I want to know a little bit more. How is it going to help the company move forward? So there's a place for asking more strategic questions in that meeting.
Mhm.
And it really
Right.
shows to others that you care about the reason of the work that you're doing.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess it kind of also makes you connected more to your work, which is always transpiring, isn't it? Yeah.
After asking questions, which is kind of like, let's say, like the beginner level way of visibility and interacting in the meeting, is also sharing your ideas and brainstorming. I think this is a really great tool for
Mhm.
visibility. That is where people start seeing you as contributing. You're
Mhm.
actually contributing to the topic, you're moving it forward, you're moving the conversation forward.
Mhm.
And if you start treating that as a brainstorming of sorts, especially I think when you work in tech, meetings have that style that it's not just somebody disseminating information to you and you're listening, but it's a bit more interactive. There's a lot of
Mhm.
brainstorming going on. And so on smaller team meetings, especially, sharing your ideas. And when you share your ideas, think about stating your assumptions. I
Mhm.
find that most times when people don't understand the idea you're sharing or what it's for, it's because there's like that, like, on the assumption level, something doesn't quite like connect. So make
Mhm.
sure that you explain the context that you're talking about. and what is your suggestion relating to what the person just said,
Mhm.
so that it makes sense, what problem you're solving, what is the assumption you're making, and share your idea. And the key thing there is, as you're sharing your idea, make sure that your explanation really fits with the technical level of the room. And I'm sure
Mhm.
this also
Right.
relates to people who are CRAs, because it sounds like a very technical profession as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Mhm. And the last thing is, if you're really feeling brave and you've kind of gone through asking questions, sharing ideas, this is, by the way, totally appropriate in like a tech team meeting.
Mhm.
But getting up, taking a marker, there's always whiteboards everywhere in tech companies. It's
Mhm.
actually really starting to like draw out your idea, to visualize what you're talking about. I find that this really helps everybody engage with you and keep
Mhm.
with you, because as you're starting to explain your idea, it's, especially if it gets like kind of like technical and nuanced, it's
Mhm.
hard to keep track of all the information just by listening. So if you
Mhm.
can like draw out, like, this leads to that, and here's an error, and here's an error,
Mhm.
you explain your idea, and then people can come up and just like
Mhm.
start contributing and kind of drawing boxes around it.
Mhm.
The other
Yeah, that
great
sounds
thing,
like a great idea.
yeah, the other great thing is that after the meeting, especially if you were explaining something, or this can become like a new idea that the team does, you take a picture of this, you put that on some, your team wiki, some knowledge sharing place,
Mhm.
or you make it into a diagram, and it stays there forever. And that is a great thing about visibility too. You want your name on documents, on diagrams. You want your name to live in the digital space of your company.
Yeah, that sounds great. I really like that idea. And I think it's really great if you can also invite others to update that document, because it kind of includes others, but still you are the kind of the person who came up with the idea. Let's bust some myths. What are the most common misconceptions about being visible?
Yeah, so I think this is such a great question. I like that you're asking that, because I don't know about CRAs, but I think it's pretty well known that in the technical profession in IT, many people are introverts. I would say like 90%
Mhm.
are introverts. And I think that when people think about visibility, for some reason people think, oh, I have to like schmooze people and small talk and network all the time, and and be that, like, the center of attention. But it's not about that at all. It's really not. Even when you think about developing relationships on the team, it's it's not a friendship. It's not some kind of like, networking connection, although it can be. It's much more about being getting comfortable about talking about your work, articulating what
Mhm.
your work is,
Mhm.
and finding a common language with other people. So that's what I just said recently about understanding their mindset, what motivates and what matters to them about your work. So it's not at all about having to be very bubbly and all that. It's just making sure that the work you do gets out there, that in a team meeting, in updates, in your one-on-ones, you're actually talking about the importance of the work you're doing and what you're doing, and how it can move the team forward, how it can move the company forward.
Mhm. I love it. I think it's um, kind of also easier to think about, oh, it's about the message. It's not about me or my personality. It's about my
Mhm.
work. So it kind of
Yeah.
almost, it takes the pressure off from yourself. It's about work, and I am proud of my work because I've spent a lot of time on it. So it's just about the message. I guess it's easier that way.
Yeah. And I think the second myth, and I see that a lot in my work, especially now in career coaching with immigrants or people who are like first generation here, were born here,
Mhm.
but coming from a different culture. I think in a lot of cultures, non-American, non-Western cultures, there's like a feeling that you need to be very humble, that you shouldn't brag, that putting your updates on, Slack, this like chat messaging app for tech companies,
Mhm.
people see that as like, why is that person keeps showing up? Like, why is that person gives an update on every little thing they do? They just want to like, they want attention. And I understand that instinct because I'm also an immigrant. And when you come from a different culture, you bring
Mhm,
those sets of values with you.
mhm,
Um, but I think it's very different when you operate in an American culture, in an American work culture, because here there's a very strong of- emphasis on advocating for yourself and just like speaking about what you're doing. Like you just said, it's not showing off, you're just describing the work you're doing.
mhm,
And why should you hide? Why should you hide what you're doing? And
mhm,
so it's really starting to think about, if I share my work, one, people will know about it, and that's great for visibility. But it's not just about that. It's if they know you're doing that, they you might prevent them from doing redundant work, right? There's a benefit to communication, to sharing. People
mhm,
know what you're doing. If they ever get stuck in a similar area, they'll be like, oh, Yulia wrote that update last week. She did
mhm,
something similar. Let me go talk to her.
mhm,
There's like this effect, right, that builds up over time. So it's
mhm,
really not showing off. It's really much more about communication.
mhm. Yeah, I think it's also very important to communicate what your strengths are in this way as well, so that maybe in the future you will be getting projects that you are fascinated with. So it's like, oh yeah, she sounded very passionate when she was talking about this or that. Maybe she would like to be included in this project. So I think it's kind of not even just bragging about anything, it's literally informing other people about what you are passionate about. That
Mhm.
is really important as well.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's very important to articulate your ideas so that they are heard and understood. How do you articulate ideas so that they are well accepted in various environments? So, you know how, for example, we have the obviously the physical meetings, but I think we can also discuss the online meetings because I think they are more dominant at the moment.
Hmm. So I think general concepts about articulation, regardless of the meeting format, is make sure that you really state, you know, before you start diving into the nitty gritty details,
Mhm,
what is the problem you're trying to, what is the idea for? What is the problem is trying to solve?
mhm,
And why? Why is it important? Are you thinking of like a longer term problem and
mhm.
you're trying to suggest a solution for that, something you foresee? It's kind of like making sure that you're transparent in your thought process, because often we tend to just jump into like the conclusion of all we thought about, but
Yeah.
not the analysis we did in our head. And so people that just hear about it for the first time, they may not understand, oh, why, how did you think about it and why it's important? And
Mhm.
what was the thing that triggered it for you? I think thinking about it that way really helps. And
Mhm.
so I also like to think about it a little bit like a pyramid, because I think for most people that are not as familiar with a topic, you need to go kind of like from the top, from like the zoomed out version to the details more and more. And then the key thing, the key skill here is based on the audience. Make sure that you see where you need to dive in. And in tech, there's this idea of like pseudocode, which really means abstract away from how the code does what it does, but more like um, what is it doing? Like,
Mhm.
is it trying to transform a table here to that? So it's like try to talk about it not with a lot of lingo and
Mhm.
terminology, but like
Yeah.
keep it simple.
Mhm.
Keep it simple. And so I think that is just a general tip about how you present your idea
Mhm.
from the top to the bottom, basically in
Mhm.
level of detail. um, in terms of how you go about it in an online meeting, I think especially because in an online meeting it's just so much harder to pick up on non-verbal cues, the
Yes.
way you would in a real physical meeting, where you can kind of see somebody like opening their mouth, you can kind of see the
Yeah.
body language, someone's trying to speak, right?
Yeah.
You don't have that. So make sure that the person who organized the meeting, it's also great if they serve a bit like as a moderator. Make sure that if you don't find a place to jump in, message them privately and say, I really want to add something here, so that they can kind of like give you the spotlight, so to speak, right? Give you the microphone. I think that is like one tool. And the other key thing is preparation. I think even more for online meetings than for natural physical meetings, is it tends to be a little bit less interactive. It tends to be more like, nobody, people are so Zoom fatigued. They just want to get off the camera and go work. So I think you need to be a little bit more conscious there about being concise, and also being a bit more prepared,
Mhm.
especially if you know that we're going to be discussing, let's say, this process improvement or how we're doing something or a technical issue. Kind of come up with like two or three bullet points and be conscious of how long you're taking
Mhm.
speaking. But I think the other key thing is, I see a lot of people not doing that, is turn your camera on. That is like the biggest signal that you are engaged and
Mhm.
that you want to add something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's also just not only is it nice for other people to see you, and I understand if people have many Zoom meetings throughout the day, maybe towards the end they are so tired that they don't really feel like anybody should be seeing them. But it's kind of interesting because before Zoom, when you have a team meeting, you would never think about kind of not letting other people see you. So it's also interesting from that point of view. But yeah, I agree. Kind of like when people can see each other, it's just better for connection. So it's not really like nobody's going to be judging you or thinking, oh, is she wearing makeup or, whatever. But just kind of people want to talk and to kind of get that connection. And I think sometimes on Zoom you have to turn things more on so that they
Yeah.
are actually visible, because in reality things that are subtle on Zoom are not going to be visible at all. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
And actually, I really like that you said no one will be judging you if you're wearing makeup or not. I think the beautiful consequence of the past year is that we all started being so much more authentic in
Mhm.
ourselves. And in these meetings, if beforehand you would go to work and put, if you're a girl, put makeup and all that and wear, I don't know, certain pants and shoes and all that. Now it's so much, people are just more understanding of each other's experience because we're all going through it together for the
Mhm.
first time in like, I don't know, history. The entire world is in it together. If it makes you feel more comfortable, put a Zoom background so that, if you're working out of bed, people don't necessarily see that.
Mhm.
But experiment with that. And the other thing, this is like a tiny tip, but in Zoom, you can set retouching so that it like makes your face look a bit,
Oh,
nicer.
okay. That's
So
great.
if that helps you show up, basically just do the things that help you show up and think, what gives you that comfort.
Yeah, that's a great point. I really do agree. I would love to get more practical. What kind of practical tips can you share for us to become more visible at meetings?
Hmm. Right. So prepare what you're interested in saying, what your message is about the work you're doing, any questions you might have on a topic, any kind of analysis or insight that you can summarize in a couple of bullet points to present, especially in an online meeting.
Hmm.
The other thing is make sure that as you articulate your idea, you talk about first the bigger picture and what are you solving? What are the assumptions you're making? Um, is there something you can explain about how you came to the idea that's not really clear? Like what triggered you to think about that? And what will be the solution without necessarily getting a lot into the technical details? So
Hmm.
I think that's like a very practical advice if you can kind of think of it in terms of these four questions.
Hmm.
Um,
Sounds great.
yeah, and the other practical things is just to take small steps forward. If
Hmm.
you never speak up in a meeting, then think of challenging yourself and speaking up in one meeting a week. Give
Yeah.
yourself a small task so
Hmm.
that you like start seeing the progress and maybe speak up once a week in a meeting for a couple weeks, and then have it, ramp it up more and more and more. And as you do that, you have this feedback loop that you see people actually are interested in what you're saying and they're reacting fine. And
Mhm.
it's this loop that you start feeling more and more confident.
Mhm.
It's also this, I think it's an important to, I think it's called the Dunning Kruger effect or something. I saw that recently, which
Oh,
is
okay, I didn't hear of it.
you this is about competence. So
Mhm.
when you start, you may be very confident and very competent in something, but then as you challenge yourself, especially if you're starting something new, you will you will experience a big dip in confidence, because all of a sudden you start to realize, what does this really mean? You start growing, it's growing pains, right? And you lose a lot of confidence. And so I feel like as we grow in our competence in an area,
Mhm.
we begin from being competent somewhere, then we want to move to the next level, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden moving to the next level, we now have to do things that we haven't done before, and we lose a lot of confidence. We now have less confidence than we had starting, but
Mhm.
that's not a reason to quit. That's actually a sign that you're actually growing and
Yeah.
you're much closer kind of to that next level. So I think it's true from visibility perspective, and from the perspective of like taking on more responsibility for something, and taking a risk.
Mhm.
Yeah, and as I said, the other practical thing that you can do is really the work on your own self,
Mhm.
which is, I think this is individual, but for me, having a quote that says, think about what can go right rather than wrong, or some kind of an affirmation, that really helps me. It also really helps me to listen to other people's stories that kind of got through everything. I love the podcast How I Built This. It's
Mhm.
about entrepreneurship, but it's I think it's relevant no matter what you do, because you kind of realize that everybody starts from not knowing, and
Mhm.
then they move forward and they challenge themselves, and it's like one step at a time you get closer and closer to the end. So think about how you can build that inner confidence. I also have a really amazing book recommendation, which is called The Confidence Code. It's about imposter syndrome and confidence and how it looks for women, and why women tend to struggle with that so much more. I would consider that essential reading. It just really, really helps you realize that confidence is not something you're born with, it's something you develop through action. So instead of waiting to be confident to take action, actually stop thinking about confidence at all. Just take action, and confidence will happen as you do that.
Mhm. And what was the title? The Confidence Code?
The Confidence Code, written by two journalists. One of them is British, I believe. One of them is American. It's like, I don't remember their last names, but it's like Claire and Kathy something.
Yeah, we'll try to put that in comments anyway.
Mhm.
There is also a great book, The Discomfort Zone by Farah Store, and it kind of gives you the insight into why you should actually relish the discomfort, because the more you welcome it, the more actually comfortable you become in that area of discomfort. And I think it's a great book, and the idea is also very kind of freeing as well, that there is so many discomforts that people go through, but if you, instead of dreading it, actually welcome it, because it, on the other side there is growth, then it kind of is very encouraging, I think.
Yeah.
um, and I would
Mhm.
love to wrap up with a low hanging fruit. Can you recommend something easy that we can start instantly next time we go to a meeting to become more visible at it?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to do is actually making eye contact with the people in the room, and especially with the person that is speaking, and really showing the nonverbal cues that you are listening to them.
Mhm.
I think it's so often when I was at meetings, either as a participant or leading a meeting, you try to find somebody to make eye contact
Yeah.
with, to tell them. And it's so discouraging when you're noticing everyone is just with their head down on their phone or working. It's discouraging. And you also feel like that they're not as interested in jumping in and participating. So
Mhm,
the best signal that you actually want to engage is just eye contact.
mhm,
And you'll often find that the speaker is trying to find you so that they can
mhm,
zone in on you. I
mhm,
know it can be sometimes a bit uncomfortable, but I think if we're talking about visibility, that's really the first step.
mhm,
Just pay attention, listen, pay attention, make eye contact. If you're comfortable, smile. Just
mhm,
show that you are there, appearing positively interested to engage.
mhm. Lovely. Yulia, thank you so much for this great insight, advice, and tips. If people want to connect with you, where can we find you?
So you can visit my website, www.yuliaeskin.com,
Mhm.
or connect with me on LinkedIn. I post there once a week, all sorts of tips related to leadership and visibility and building your skill set. So I would love to connect with you there.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much.
So, how does this apply to a CRA role? Like Julia said, visibility is literally a foundation of any career advancement, promotions, getting more responsibility, getting more interesting work, leadership, and visibility is really the first step. So sometimes we may be under the impression that our work will speak for ourselves, our managers will reward us for our commitment. However, it is super important that other people in your department notice you, other line managers know who you are. Your career really depends on it, and meeting and connecting with your colleagues in your industry often will give you kind of surprising opportunities down the line. So I would like to give you 5 tips on how to become visible at CRA team meetings. So one of them is consider what may be holding you back from being more visible at team meetings. And by getting to the bottom of what may be holding you back by asking the why question, you may actually discover that you no longer fear that scenario, or something that was important to you in the past that was holding you back is no longer valid for you. Um, so, for example, you could be asking yourself, why am I afraid to speak up at meetings? Because I am afraid that people will think that I'm stupid. And then you go deeper. So then you ask the why question again. So, why am I afraid of people thinking that I'm stupid? So then the answer could be, for example, I am afraid of people thinking that I'm stupid because then they will ignore me. And then again, you drill deeper and you ask, why am I afraid of people ignoring me? And then maybe you will get to a point where you think, hey, but I'm actually not afraid of the fact that people will be ignoring me because I have a CRA role, I work on a study, I have a study team, and my work matters because your work matters and you need to report on your work. So it kind of is a bigger picture and nobody will ignore you. So then you discover that that fear that was holding you back is actually irrelevant. The next tip is keeping it light. So be kind to yourself and just like you would be to others. And that's what we also said with Yulia. Don't put yourself under the pressure of getting it right the first time. You're human, mistakes happen. If something goes wrong and you fail, it's fine, it's okay. You fail and then you try again and then you just progress, and that's the normal process of it. The important thing is to keep trying and being kind to yourself in the process so that you actually maybe even do enjoy it. um, the next tip is adopt a small step strategy. So set yourself small, achievable goals so that throughout this process of becoming more visible, you feel motivated. So, for example, you can start turning the camera on when you have Zoom meetings. Then the next step could be saying hello when you dial in and asking the host how they are doing. The next step could be maybe asking a question during a meeting. Then after that, maybe you could even ask the host if next time you could present on some subject that you are passionate about. The next tip is practice, practice, practice. As we all know, practice makes perfect. And try to become more visible wherever you can. So you can start with smaller meetings, like, for example, meeting with the site staff. Maybe then you will become more visible at study team meetings. Maybe then you will feel confident to become more visible at departmental meetings. And then maybe the investigator meeting. So kind of practice, practice, and practice wherever you can. And then the fifth and last tip is remember that low-hanging fruit that Yulia was talking about. So paying attention, making the eye contact, maybe nodding and smiling is really a very good start. So yeah, that's it. That's the 5 tips. I hope you found them useful. Thank you for joining us. And I hope that you can take away some of these things and implement them right away to become more visible at your work meetings. You can find more tips on our monthly newsletter, so make sure you sign up on our website, www.whitewistariaacademy.com. Also follow us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at White Wisteria Academy. You will be in a good company. Thank you so much and speak to you soon.